The city that vanished in one night long before steel towers touched the clouds, before the hum of highways or the glow of neon lights, the heart of America beat in the silence of the earth. There was a city here once, vast, ordered, and alive. A city of pyramids and palaces, of astronomers and priests, of farmers who turned the floodplains into gold. Its name was Cahokia, the largest city ever built north of Mexico, home to tens of thousands, rivaling medieval London at its peak. And then, as suddenly as it rose, it was gone. The lost empire of the Mississippi. 1,000 years ago, in the heart of what is now Illinois, the Mississippi River flowed past a metropolis unlike any other in North America. At its height around the year 1100 CE, Cahokia covered nearly 6 square miles, with more than 120 earthen mounds arranged in geometric precision. Its centerpiece, Monk's Mound, still rises 100 feet above the plain, larger in volume than the Great Pyramid of Giza. From its summit, priests and astronomers watched the horizon, measuring the seasons by the movement of the sun and stars. They called it the center of the world. But to the modern traveler speeding down the interstate outside St. Louis, it's just a cluster of grass-covered hills, silent and unassuming. Few realize they're passing the ruins of a lost American empire. The dawn builders long before Europeans crossed the Atlantic, long before the word America existed, a people we now call the Mississippians emerged from centuries of migration and innovation. They mastered the rivers, trading copper from the Great Lakes, shells from the Gulf, obsidian from the Rockies. Their trade routes stitched together the continent like veins of light. By 1050 CE, a spark ignited along the Mississippi floodplain. Population surged. Farms multiplied. Temples rose. A cultural explosion transformed scattered villages into the continent's first true city. No written language survives, but the soil remembers, and the geometry of their mounds speaks in numbers more precise than words. Woodhenge, the calendar of the sun at the edge of the city, archaeologists uncovered a perfect circle of tall red cedar posts, a wooden Stonehenge. At dawn on the solstice, the sun rises exactly between two posts, casting light across the face of Monk's Mound. It was a calendar. A compass. A monument to the harmony between earth and sky. From here, the rulers of Cahokia measured time itself, predicting floods, planting seasons, and ceremonies. To control the calendar was to control destiny. The city of fire and earth, Cahokia's skyline was a forest of temples and homes built from wattle and daub. Its streets aligned to cardinal directions. Every structure had meaning. In the central plaza, tens of thousands gathered for rituals that blended politics, religion, and spectacle. At night, fires burned across the plain, their glow visible for miles. To outsiders, it must have looked like the city of the gods. And then, one night, the fires went out. The vanishing around 1350 CE, the mounds were abandoned. Houses collapsed. The plazas emptied. The river reclaimed the fields. No one knows why. There was no invading army, no record of plague or war. Only silence. Archaeologists found signs of sudden decline, evidence of drought, resource exhaustion, and internal unrest. But there's also something stranger, traces of mass ritual destruction, temples burned deliberately, idols buried upside down, as if the people had turned against their own gods. Within a single generation, a city that had stood for centuries was gone. The ghost of an empire. When European explorers arrived in the 1600s, they found only stories, vague memories of the ancient ones who built the hills. To them, the idea that Native Americans could have constructed such a metropolis seemed impossible. So they credited others, Egyptians, Vikings, even a lost tribe of Israel. But the truth was simpler, and far greater. Cahokia was proof that advanced civilization had risen on American soil long before Columbus, long before colonial borders drew lines across the continent. Its people built without stone or wheel, without beasts of burden, yet they achieved what few societies on earth could match, a city designed in balance with the cosmos. The rise of Cahokia, America's first metropolis before there were cities of glass and steel, before Washington, before New York, before any border divided the land, there was a river. And on its banks, a dream began to take shape, a dream that would become the greatest city the ancient Americas ever knew. That river was the Mississippi, and the dream was Cahokia. The river that breathed life 10,000 years after the last ice age ended, the Mississippi River carved one of the richest floodplains on earth, a world of fertile soil and endless horizon. The people who lived along its banks were not nomads. They were farmers, builders, and visionaries. They planted maize, beans, and squash, the three sisters, and tamed the seasons through rhythm, patience, and ritual. Each flood brought new soil. Each harvest brought new hope. Slowly, villages formed, clusters of wooden houses around communal fires. Trade routes expanded, stretching from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico. Copper, shells, obsidian, and pearls changed hands like currency. And in the middle of it all, near what is now Collinsville, Illinois, a spark caught fire. It began as a village, and became an empire. The builders of earth and sky around the year 1000 CE, the people of Cahokia began to build, not from stone, but from earth. Thousands of laborers worked in rhythm, carrying basket after basket of clay and soil on their backs, stacking them into monumental forms. Each mound was aligned with astronomical precision, to the sun, the moon, and the cardinal directions. The greatest of them all was Monk's Mound, a colossal platform covering 14 acres, rising 100 feet, and built entirely by hand. It required the movement of more than 22 million cubic feet of earth, all without wheels, metal, or beasts of burden. From its summit, priests and leaders watched over a city that stretched for miles, wooden temples glowing in the sunlight, smoke from hearths spiraling into the sky. Cahokia had become the beating heart of the continent. The Age of Fire at its height, around 1100 CE, Cahokia may have held 30,000 to 40,000 people, more than London or Paris at the time. It was a city of farmers and astronomers, artisans and warriors, dreamers and builders. Roads connected neighborhoods to plazas. Elevated causeways led to sacred mounds. From dawn till dusk, the air was alive, traders shouting, children playing, drums echoing across the flatlands. In the center stood a massive open plaza, nearly the size of 35 football fields. Here, people gathered for festivals, markets, and ceremonies that unified the city in rhythm and faith. At night, torches illuminated the plaza like stars fallen to earth. It was not chaos, it was choreography. A society built not just with hands, but with belief. The priest kings of the mounds. Cahokia's rulers were more than politicians, they were divine intermediaries. Each king claimed descent from the sun god, the bringer of life and time. Their palaces sat atop the mounds, elevated above the world below. To climb the stairs of a mound was to move closer to heaven. From these heights, the priest kings governed the rhythm of life, the planting of crops, the timing of rituals, the offering of sacrifices. Their word was law. Their presence, sacred. Below them, the people lived in harmony, or so it seemed. Woodhenge, the circle of the sun on the western edge of Cahokia, stood a marvel, a great circle of wooden posts now called Woodhenge. It was both a temple and a calendar, designed with astonishing astronomical precision. At the spring and autumn equinoxes, the rising sun aligned perfectly between two posts, illuminating the main plaza and casting its first light upon Monk's Mound. It was here that priests announced the coming of new seasons, signaling planting and harvest. This was no accident. Cahokia's people had mapped the heavens. They understood that the rhythm of the stars governed the rhythm of the earth. They did not separate science from spirit, for them, they were the same. The web of trade and power. Cahokia's influence stretched far beyond its walls. Artifacts from the city have been found as far as the Great Lakes, the Gulf Coast, and the Appalachian foothills. Its traders moved along rivers like veins, carrying copper, shells, pearls, mica, and even obsidian. This network made Cahokia the economic and cultural center of the ancient American Midwest. It wasn't just a city, it was a capital, a metropolis of the unknown world. The people of the earth. Archaeology reveals a society of remarkable skill and complexity. Houses were built on elevated ridges to avoid flooding. Fields were irrigated through canals and controlled burns. Cahokians were artists, too. They carved effigy pipes, molded clay figurines, and created intricate jewelry of copper and shell. One burial discovered in the city, known as the Birdman burial, contained a man laid upon a bed of 20,000 shell beads arranged in the shape of a falcon. He was surrounded by offerings, copper axes, pearls, mica plates, and the remains of human sacrifices. This was not mere burial, it was ascension. The Birdman represented transformation, death into divinity. Cahokia's people lived and died in the service of cosmic balance. The society of order. Unlike Europe or Asia, Cahokia had no written records. Its story is told through earth, bone, and pattern. Every mound, every plaza, every artifact reflects an intricate social system. The city was divided into districts, farmers to the east, artisans to the south, nobles at the center. Even the layout of the streets mirrored the cosmic order: east for sunrise, west for death, north for the unknown, south for rebirth. Life itself was a ceremony. The spark of expansion. By the 12th century, Cahokia's population exploded. Families from hundreds of miles away migrated here, drawn by faith, trade, or the promise of order. New mounds rose, new districts formed, and the wooden walls of the city expanded outward. The fields fed tens of thousands, and the Mississippi became a highway of life. Cahokia was unstoppable. But every empire, even one of soil and faith, carries the seeds of its own collapse. Shadows on the horizon. Archaeologists have found evidence of unrest, charred remains of homes, signs of fortifications built late in the city's history, weapons buried hastily beneath floors. Something had changed. The balance that held the city together was beginning to fracture. Droughts struck the Midwest. Crops began to fail. The Mississippi, once a giver of life, turned unpredictable, floods alternating with years of dryness. Famine breeds fear. Fear breeds conflict. By the mid-1200s, Cahokia's golden age began to tarnish. The warning of the stars. The same priests who once read the heavens for guidance now looked up in dread. The sun rose out of alignment with Woodhenge. The floods came at the wrong time. The rituals no longer worked. And when the gods fall silent, even kings cannot save their cities. Cahokia was built on faith, faith in order, in the stars, in the eternal return of balance. But nature does not obey the prayers of men. As drought deepened and power faltered, the city that once ruled the heart of the continent began to crumble from within. The builders of earth and fire had reached the edge of their world, and were about to face the storm that would erase them from history. The Golden Age and the gathering storm. For nearly 2 centuries, Cahokia stood at the center of the world. It was a city of rhythm, of life, death, and rebirth woven into every sunrise and river current. The people of the mounds had mastered the cycles of nature. But even the brightest flame casts shadows. And within the glow of Cahokia's golden age, those shadows were already stirring. The city of sun and shadow. At its peak around 1150 CE, Cahokia was a living engine of faith and order. Every street, every home, every mound was aligned to the heavens. At dawn, the first light touched Monk's Mound, gilding its temple in gold. Drums thundered through the morning air, echoing across the fields. The people rose with the sun, for to them the city was the sun, the heart of all creation. But beneath the order of the plaza, a different rhythm beat, one of ambition, ritual, and sacrifice. The ceremonial heart. In the center of Cahokia's plaza, a wooden stairway climbed to the top of Monk's Mound. Here stood the temple of the great sun, the ruler's palace and the city's spiritual axis. The ruler, known to archaeologists only as the sun priest, presided over ceremonies that joined heaven and earth. Offerings were made to the gods of rain, corn, and fire. Drummers pounded in rhythm as dancers moved in spirals, mirroring the cosmos. From the top of the mound, the priest raised his arms to the sky, and the people below lifted their voices like thunder. This was more than worship, it was sustenance. To the people of Cahokia, faith wasn't belief. It was survival. The ritual of renewal. Each year, as the sun reached its highest point, the people celebrated the feast of the sun's return, a ritual of balance and renewal. For 3 days, the city fasted. Fires were extinguished. Silence covered the plaza. Then, on the 4th morning, as the first light broke across the horizon, the priests lit a single fire atop Monk's Mound. That flame was carried through the city, a river of light rekindling every hearth. It was a symbol of unity, of rebirth. But it was also a reminder of control. Only the priests could bring back the fire. Only the sun's chosen could renew the world. The sacred and the fearful. The same power that united Cahokia also bounded in fear. Deep beneath one of the smaller mounds, archaeologists found something unsettling, a mass grave containing more than 50 young women, their lives ended in the same instant. Nearby, another pit held the remains of men who appeared to have been executed violently, their hands missing, their skulls fractured. Among the bodies was a single figure laid on a bed of shell beads shaped like a bird, the Birdman, believed to represent the city's divine ruler or warrior god. Was this a sacrifice to the gods? A ritual of kingship? Or the evidence of rebellion crushed beneath ceremony? We may never know. But the soil remembers what history forgets. The walls of order. By the mid-1100s, Cahokia's leaders built a great wooden stockade, a wall nearly 2 miles long surrounding the central mounds. To some, it was protection. To others, a warning. The walls separated the elite from the commoners, the divine from the earthly. They marked a society growing more rigid, more fearful of the chaos beyond its borders. And perhaps, of the chaos within. The gathering storm. For years, the floods of the Mississippi had nourished Cahokia's fields. But nature, like time, does not serve forever. Around 1200 CE, the climate began to shift. Pollen records show signs of prolonged droughts alternating with violent floods. Harvests faltered. The same river that once fed the city began to drown it. As food grew scarce, the people turned inward. The plazas that once echoed with celebration now filled with unrest. The priests demanded more offerings. The sacrifices grew larger. The fires burned hotter. The cracks beneath the faith. The rituals continued, but something had changed. The alignment between Woodhenge and the sun began to drift, a subtle sign that the calendar itself was failing. To a city built on cosmic order, such misalignment was disaster. If the gods no longer obeyed the sky, then who truly ruled? Some scholars believe this moment marked the beginning of Cahokia's unraveling, a slow spiritual collapse as the faith that bound the city began to break apart. The river turns. The Mississippi is not a river, it is a living thing. For centuries it had flowed steady and kind. But in the early 13th century, something changed. Sediment layers show signs of massive flooding, entire farmlands washed away. Villages along the outskirts of Cahokia were abandoned. Families fled north and south. The city's population began to shrink. And in the darkness of the floodplain, fear took root. The Great Fire. In the archaeological record, a single layer of ash covers parts of the city, a sign of catastrophe. Houses were burned not from war, but from within. Temples were destroyed, idols shattered. It is as if the people turned on their own gods, a cultural implosion written in flame. Perhaps famine drove them to desperation. Perhaps the priest-kings lost their authority. Perhaps, as the legends whisper, the spirits withdrew their light, and the people followed them into the earth. Whatever the cause, the fire spread, not just through homes, but through faith itself. The Exodus. By 1250 CE, thousands began to leave. Entire districts fell silent. The fields turned to wild grass. Some migrated north into what is now Wisconsin, others south toward the Gulf Coast. They carried with them fragments of Cahokia's legacy, mound building, iconography, the worship of the sun. Across the continent, echoes of Cahokia's culture appeared in distant tribes, the Natchez, the Caddo, the Creek, all inheritors of a vanished empire's memory. But the city itself remained behind, empty and vast, its mounds rising like tombstones for a civilization that no one remembered. Archaeologists believe the last act of the Cahokians was ceremonial. The remaining priests gathered atop Monk's Mound. They offered their final prayers to the setting sun. Then, they extinguished the sacred fire, the flame that had burned for centuries. It was over. In one generation, a city that had defined the heart of a continent fell into silence. The ghost city. When European settlers arrived 600 years later, they found nothing but hills, green, silent, and strangely symmetrical. Local tribes warned them, those are the homes of the ancient ones. Disturb them, and the earth will take you too. To the settlers, the idea that Native Americans could have built such a city was unthinkable. So they invented stories that the mounds were built by Vikings, Egyptians, or lost tribes of Israel. But the truth was right beneath their feet. The builders of Cahokia were not foreigners. They were Americans, the first Americans to build a civilization of their own. The forgotten legacy narrator, rising emotion. Cahokia's story is not just a mystery of history. It's a mirror. Every great society believes it will last forever. Every empire thinks it can outlive the storms. But like Cahokia, all civilizations depend on balance, between people and earth, power and humility, faith and reason. When that balance breaks, even the mightiest cities turn to dust. The fires have long gone out. But beneath the soil of Illinois, the heartbeat of Cahokia still whispers, a warning written in clay and ash. Rediscovery. When America remembered its lost city for centuries, the city of Cahokia lay hidden in plain sight. 1,000 years of wind and rain softened its sharp edges. Grass grew where temples once stood. To the untrained eye, it was nothing more than rolling hills under the wide Midwestern sky. But the earth never truly forgets. And in the quiet fields near modern-day St. Louis, the bones of a forgotten empire waited to speak again. The settlers and the mounds. In the early 1800s, American settlers moving westward came upon strange formations dotting the riverbanks and prairies. They called them Indian mounds. Some were small as houses. Others rose as high as 6-story buildings. Farmers plowed over them for crops. Railroad workers dug into them for fill dirt. They didn't know they were disturbing graves, temples, and palaces of the continent's first city. One traveler, writing in 1811, described the Great Central Mound as a hill not made by nature, but by hands of great industry long forgotten. He didn't realize he was standing on what we now call Monk's Mound, the largest prehistoric earthen structure in the Americas. The monks of the mound. In the 1830s, a group of Trappist monks purchased the land near the site. They built a small monastery and farmed the surrounding fields. They were fascinated by the massive earthen hill beside them, so much so that it became their namesake, Monk's Mound. But the monks had no idea what lay beneath their feet. To them, the mound was sacred, a natural altar to God. Ironically, they were right. It was sacred, but to a people far older than Christianity itself. The first excavations in 1860, amateur archaeologists began to dig into the mounds. They found pottery, copper tools, bones, and ash, signs of a civilization sophisticated beyond expectation. Yet the scientific community of the time refused to believe that Native Americans could have built such a city. Instead, they invented myths that the mounds were the work of a lost white race. That an ancient civilization, unrelated to the tribes still living in America, had vanished long ago. It was a narrative rooted not in discovery, but in denial. The real builders of Cahokia, the ancestors of modern indigenous nations, were being erased from their own history. The Smithsonian steps in. By the late 1800s, the Smithsonian Institution sent teams to study the mound sites across the Mississippi Valley. Among them was Cyrus Thomas, an ethnologist determined to solve the mound builder mystery. For decades, public imagination had been captured by wild theories that the mounds were built by Egyptians, Phoenicians, even Atlanteans. But after years of research, Thomas presented his conclusion in 1894: the mound builders were none other than the ancestors of the American Indians. His statement challenged every racist myth of the era, and it was met with both applause and outrage. At last, science had spoken. America's first city had truly been built by the first Americans. The 20th century awakening. In the early 1900s, archaeologists began systematic digs at Cahokia. They discovered that Monk's Mound was not a hill at all, it was an engineered pyramid of layered soil, built in stages over centuries. Each layer revealed new stories, changes in ritual, architecture, and climate. By mid-century, aerial photography showed the full scale of Cahokia, a sprawling city with plazas, causeways, and neighborhoods stretching for miles. It was, as one archaeologist put it, a pre-Columbian metropolis equal to anything of its time. And yet, few Americans knew its name. While children learned of Rome, Athens, and Egypt, Cahokia remained absent from textbooks, an American wonder, forgotten by its own nation. The skeletons speak. In the 1960s and 70s, a new generation of archaeologists began re-examining Cahokia with advanced techniques. Carbon dating revealed the city's age, over a millennium old. Excavations uncovered mass graves, ceremonial plazas, and remnants of the great wooden stockade that once encircled the sacred precinct. They found evidence of long-distance trade, social hierarchy, and even warfare. They found art, shell gorgets, copper ornaments, clay figurines of deities. And they found something more profound, the remains of lives lived in harmony with the land. Each discovery peeled back another layer of America's forgotten soul. The myth reborn. Narrator, steady tone. By the end of the 20th century, Cahokia had been recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, one of only a handful in the United States. But as it entered global recognition, myths began to rise again, this time, in a new form. Some conspiracy theorists claimed Cahokia was connected to Egypt, to Atlantis, even to extraterrestrial visitors. The internet era turned science into spectacle, truth into entertainment. But amid the noise, real archaeologists continued their quiet work, restoring the dignity of the ancient city, one layer of soil at a time. A city older than memory. Modern research has transformed what we know about Cahokia. We now understand its people were astronomers who tracked solstices and eclipses with astonishing precision. We know their mounds were not random but part of a vast cosmic design, a reflection of the stars above. We know they altered the landscape intentionally, shaping rivers and lakes to feed their fields and rituals. And yet, we still do not know their name for themselves. To us, they are the Mississippians. To history, they are the ancestors of a continent's first civilizations. To the earth, they are simply home. The silence between the mounds today, the mounds stand quiet beneath open sky. The hum of cars from St. Louis replaces the chants of priests and the songs of traders. Visitors climb Monk's Mound to see the horizon once worshipped as divine. At sunrise, the light still falls exactly as it did 1,000 years ago. If you stand there long enough, the wind carries whispers, the murmur of life that once filled the plains. Not ghosts, but echoes. The memory of a city that refused to die, even after being forgotten. The lesson of rediscovery narrator, Rising Tone Cahokia's rediscovery was not just the uncovering of artifacts. It was the rediscovery of humility. It reminded America that civilization did not begin in Europe, or Asia, or Africa alone. It thrived here, in the soil, in the rivers, in the rhythm of the land. It reminded us that greatness does not depend on marble or metal, but on harmony, between people, nature, and belief. And perhaps that is why Cahokia vanished, because it lost that harmony, and the earth simply reclaimed what was hers. The city beneath us, archaeologists now estimate that 2/3 of ancient Cahokia remains unexcavated, buried beneath farmland and suburban sprawl. Beneath schools, highways, and shopping centers lie unmarked tombs and forgotten plazas, silent witnesses to the rise and fall of an empire. Cahokia is not gone. It's simply waiting, beneath our feet, beneath our noise, beneath our memory. We like to think the past is buried. But the earth remembers everything. Beneath the grass of Illinois lies proof that America's story did not begin with colonists or conquest, but with dreamers who built a city of light and faith from nothing but soil and will. They called upon the sun to guide them. And when the sun turned away, they vanished, but their shadow never left. The fall of the city of the sun, every civilization believes it will last forever. That its walls are eternal. That its gods will never fall silent. But time has no mercy. And when balance breaks, even the brightest empires crumble. For Cahokia, the city of the sun, the end came not with invasion, but with the slow, relentless hand of the earth itself. The first signs at first, the changes were subtle. The rains came late. The river rose too high. The crops, maize, beans, and squash, began to fail. The Mississippi, once a benevolent giver, became unpredictable. Where it had once flooded gently, it now tore at the land with fury, drowning fields and washing away homes. Then, in the years that followed, came the opposite, drought. The river shrank. The fish disappeared. The fertile soil cracked like bone. The very land that had made Cahokia powerful was now turning against it. The climate of collapse, modern scientists call it the medieval warm period, a time between the 9th and 14th centuries when global temperatures shifted dramatically. To the people of Cahokia, it was not climate change. It was the wrath of the gods. Pollen samples from ancient lakebeds near the site show a story written in dust, once green fields turning barren, forests burned for fuel and farmland, rainfall patterns collapsing into chaos. The city had outgrown the land that sustained it. Its population, tens of thousands strong, needed more food than nature could provide. The priests could offer prayers. But the earth had stopped listening. The river's revenge. In the 13th century, the Mississippi rose again, higher than ever before. Floodwaters surged through the floodplain, burying homes beneath layers of silt and clay. Archaeologists have found entire neighborhoods encased in river sediment, the signature of a natural disaster on a massive scale. When the waters receded, what remained was ruin. Thousands were displaced. The city's once perfect order dissolved. And in that chaos, a deeper conflict began, not between gods and men, but between the people themselves. The walls of fear. Around this time, a wall was built, a great wooden stockade encircling the city's sacred center. To protect against what? No one knows. Perhaps invading neighbors. Perhaps their own citizens, now restless and desperate. The wall was rebuilt again and again, each time higher, thicker, stronger. Cahokia had become a city of fear. Its unity shattered. its spirit, caged. The last festivals, even as famine spread, the rituals continued. The priests promised that sacrifice would bring rain. They built pyres in the plazas. They offered gifts to the heavens. And when those gifts failed, they turned to blood. Archaeologists have found pits filled with sacrificed men and women from this era, far more than in Cahokia's earlier centuries. Perhaps the priests hoped to restore balance through death. Perhaps they were trying to control a people slipping beyond their reach. Whatever their intent, the gods remained silent. Fire across the city one night, we do not know when, fire swept through the city. Entire districts were burned. Temples collapsed. The layer of ash still lies beneath the soil, a black scar in the heart of America. Some fires were accidental. Others were deliberate. It was as if the people, once bound by faith, had turned upon their own creation, torching the monuments that had defined them. Perhaps it was rebellion. Perhaps it was surrender. Perhaps it was the moment they realized their gods had abandoned them. The exodus after the fires, the exodus began. Families fled the smoking ruins, taking only what they could carry. They followed the rivers north and south, vanishing into the forests. Within a few generations, the great plazas fell silent. The fields grew wild. The temples crumbled. By 1350 CE, the city of the sun was gone, swallowed by time, buried by its own soil. The theories of the fall historians have debated for decades how such a vast city could vanish so completely. Some blame environmental collapse, deforestation, erosion, and overfarming that destroyed the ecosystem. Others see disease, pathogens spreading along trade routes. Still others suggest warfare, conflicts between factions or with neighboring tribes. But maybe the truth is not one reason, but all of them, the slow unraveling of balance in a civilization built on harmony. When nature faltered, faith faltered. And without faith, even the strongest walls crumble. The Last Light archaeologists believe that the city's final act was symbolic, a ritual farewell. On Monk's Mound, where fire once burned eternally, they found evidence that the temple was dismantled carefully, not destroyed. It's as if the last priests performed one final ceremony, not to save their city, but to release it. They lit a single flame, then let it die. A civilization extinguishing its own light in peace, rather than chaos. And in that silence, Cahokia vanished. The forgotten empire. When the first Europeans crossed the Mississippi centuries later, the land was quiet. Tribes who lived nearby spoke of the ancient ones, the people who built the hills and walked with the sun. But even they did not remember the names, the kings, the wars, or the prayers. An entire chapter of human history, erased by wind and time. And perhaps that is what makes Cahokia so haunting. Not just that it fell, but that it was forgotten. The warning beneath the soil. Cahokia's ruins tell a story older than America itself, a warning about balance, ambition, and consequence. They remind us that civilization is not made of stone or steel, but of faith and equilibrium. The same forces that built Cahokia, ingenuity, expansion, and hunger, built our modern world. And the same forces that destroyed it, greed, imbalance, denial, still move within us today. The fall of Cahokia was not just the end of a city. It was a prophecy. When the fires burned out, the city fell silent. But silence is not death. It is memory, waiting. Beneath the green grass of Illinois, the city of the sun still breathes. Every gust of wind that sweeps across the mounds carries its voice. We were here. We built. We dreamed. We vanished. Epilogue, echoes of earth and sky at dawn, the light returns to Monk's Mound. The horizon glows the same way it did 1,000 years ago, the same sun rising over the same river, spilling gold across a city that refuses to die. The drums are gone. The chants are silent. But the land remembers. Every mound is a heartbeat. Every blade of grass is a whisper. And beneath it all, the soul of Cahokia still breathes. The archaeologists and the heirs today, scientists, historians, and descendants of indigenous nations walk the fields of Cahokia with reverence. They kneel beside the soil, brushing away dust grain by grain, uncovering the past not to own it, but to listen to it. Every artifact they find, a piece of pottery, a copper bead, a charred fragment of wood, is a word from a forgotten language, a syllable in a story still being told. The descendants of the Mississippian peoples, the Osage, the Quapaw, the Choctaw, the Natchez, return here to perform quiet ceremonies. They do not rebuild the city. They honor its spirit. Because to them, Cahokia never fell. It simply changed form. The science of memory modern technology has given the dead their voices back. Ground-penetrating radar maps the mounds without disturbing them. LiDAR scans reveal lost plazas and buried causeways stretching for miles beneath farmland. The data forms a ghost map, a glowing outline of the city as it once was. Each pixel is a heartbeat resurrected. From above, you can see it clearly, a perfect geometry of faith and order, a civilization that aligned itself with the stars, one that understood, perhaps better than we do, that life and cosmos are one continuous dance. The return of the sun every year, hundreds gather at Cahokia to watch the solstice sunrise. As the first light breaks, it aligns once again with the ancient posts of Woodhenge, just as it did when priests once raised their arms to the heavens. For a few moments, time folds in on itself. The modern and the ancient meet. And for those who stand there in silence, it feels as if the city is alive again, its people watching from the other side of the horizon. What the city teaches Cahokia is not a tragedy. It is a lesson, written in earth instead of ink. It teaches us that greatness is not measured by how high we build, but by how well we live with the world that builds us. The people of Cahokia lived in balance for centuries. They farmed without destroying. They worshipped without conquering. They built monuments not of greed, but of gratitude. Their fall was not the failure of a people, it was the warning of a planet. When we exhaust the land, when we silence the rivers, when we take without balance, the earth remembers, and it reclaims. The mounds are not ruins. They are mirrors. The American Echo just a few miles west, the skyline of St. Louis glitters with glass and steel, the arch rising like a modern pyramid. The highways that cut across Illinois trace paths that once led to Cahokia's plazas. Beneath them lie the bones of the first city built on this soil. The modern world hums above the ancient one, unaware, yet connected. Cahokia is not past. It is beneath every step we take. We live on its shoulders. The immortal flame. If you stand on the top of Monk's Mound at night and look toward the horizon, the stars shimmer exactly as they did for the priest kings 1,000 years ago. The same constellations. The same North Star guiding wanderers home. For a brief moment, you can feel it, the rhythm of eternity, the quiet conversation between earth and sky. That was Cahokia's true secret. Not its mounds or monuments. But its understanding that life moves in circles, that endings are beginnings wearing different names. The city that vanished in one night did not die. It became part of the planet's breath. Closing reflection. We search the past for answers, but maybe the past searches for us, through ruins, through memory, through the wind across forgotten fields. Cahokia was America's first great city, a place where earth touched the heavens, and humanity dared to dream in harmony with both. Its people are gone, but their message endures, that no empire stands above nature, and no civilization is ever truly lost. Because as long as the sun rises over the Mississippi, and the wind moves through the mounds, and someone still listens to the whispers of the earth, Cahokia lives.